Hi, Trevor here, reflecting on life through music. Welcome and thank you for stopping by. It's fantastic that you are here. Well, I trust you enjoyed my last video on Frenchman Bob Sinclair. And through his song Love Generation, the challenge to all of us was to be love generators and to make a positive difference in our small parts of the world. So I trust you enjoyed that one. Well, we go from there to one of the most influential classical composers of all time, and it is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And I have got a few notes here today about Mozart because it's probably good to find out a little bit more about him. And so we've got to put the glasses on so I can read them. It happens when you get older, guys, the glasses have to go on. So every student is familiar, well, music student is familiar with at least a few works of Mozart. In fact, his works have been celebrated, studied and performed since he began writing at the age of 6 years old, right? And has established his lasting fame as a prominent part of Western history. He's gifted, multi-talented musician, and like other geniuses, he lived an influential but exciting but turbulent life. And his legacy is one that has lasted from his death until now. So Johannes Christomas Wolfgangus Theophilus Mozart, he was born in 1756 in Salzburg, which is now Austria. And at that time, it was part of the Holy Roman Catholic Empire. And so Mozart was a staunch Catholic. He was one of 6 children, and he and his elder sister were the only 2 out of those 6 that survived through infancy. His father, Leopold Mozart, was a native of Germany, and he also composed music. And he was primarily a musician for Prince Archbishop of Salzburg. Incidentally, he wrote a violin textbook that was well received and published in the year Mozart was born. So this is the kind of pedigree that we're talking about, influence from a very, very young age. When he was just 3 years old, Mozart would listen to his sister's instruction and playing on the clavier. Now, the clavier was a start to the piano, the very early stages of that. And he began to play along and was fascinated with the blending of pitches. He did begin playing at the age of 5, as you do when you're a child genius, and he could play the clavier faultlessly at that age, and he'd already begun composing small snippets at that time. His father, his teacher, instructed him in languages and other academic areas. Now, Mozart composed over 600 works that are catalogued in the Köchel and numbered according to the order in which they were written. His earliest works, K1 to 5, were written in childhood and continued to his unfinished Requiem, which is number K6 to 6. Among these works, there are 56 symphonies. Now, symphonies go on for an hour. And you'll start to realise how amazing this is when you realise the number of years that Mozart actually lived for. We'll get onto that in a minute. 23 piano concertos, 5 violin concertos, 4 horn concertos, and various string quartets, concertos, and other arrangements, sacred masses, and 22 operas. Now, operas go on for about an hour, 2 to 3 hours. And so that's a lot of music, guys. It is an incredible amount of music. We've got to remember that with guys in the 1700s, they had no computers. In fact, they often had to come up with all the harmonies and all of the melodies for the number of orchestra members on stage in their heads. And then they would present this music to the orchestra and then hope they got it all right. Now, of course, with Mozart, they always were right. From the age of 7, he was travelling around with his father and family and was performing in various locations around Europe. Some locations included the court in Vienna, the Imperial Court in Vienna and Prague, as well as courts in Munich, Paris, and London. His first symphony was written when he was only 8 years old. Absolutely legendary, even from such a young age. During the years when his family toured, he met a number of important influences, including J.C. Bach. That's not J.S. Bach, that's J.C. Bach, who he visited in London. And while travelling with his father to Rome, having heard Allegri's Misery in the Sistine Chapel, Mozart transcribed it from ear, creating an unauthorized copy of a work that was jealously guarded by the Vatican. So he sat down, he listened to it, and from ear, he actually wrote out the note to note perfectly. Returning from Italy in 1773, he garnered quite a bit of success, but felt stifled by the pay of a court musician for Prince Archbishop Hieronymus Colloredo, and resigned in 1777. This became a very important move for Mozart. Although he was encouraged to return to his composition, he wanted to pursue a career independent from the royal patronage, changing the course of his life. But, like many people who choose to, in a sense, go into business for themselves, his life was characterised by volatility. Periods of prosperity and enthusiasm were interspersed with times of depression and bankruptcy and insolvency. He was awarded the Order of the Golden Spur. This was a papal order of knighthood bestowed by individuals who have contributed to the fame of the church. I did talk about many of his compositions. There were many sacred masses composed during those compositions by Pope Clement the 14th in 1770. Towards the end of the decade and of the 1780s, his life was racked by financial woes and he had limited his experiences. Maynard Solomon has suggested that this was the time of deep depression for this talented composer and virtuoso, because he could not only compose, he could play really, really well. During his final year in life in 1791, now this is a very important thing to note about Mozart. He was on the road to personal recovery and very productive until his illness struck. No one actually is sure of the exact cause of his untimely death, although many people have speculated. He was only 35 years old. Just pause and think about that for a minute. 35 years old. And for him to write over 600 pieces of music, including over 50-hour-long symphonies, including over 22 3 to 4 hour operas, you start to think of the prolific output this guy actually had. And quite amazing to think that someone was taken so young who was such a musical genius. One of the geniuses of all time, really. Interestingly, his lifelong rival Antonio Salieri claimed that he poisoned Mozart, but this was never verified and is thought to be false. I mean, what a stupid thing to say about a rival. Even though he was a rival, he was a genius. His death on November 20, 1791 sparked a surge in his reputation, and Joseph Haydn, another classical master at the time, once told Mozart's father, "I tell you before God, as an honest man, your son is the greatest composer known to me and repute. He has a taste and what is more, the greatest skill in composition." He has influenced many composers after him, including such prominent figures as Beethoven and Brahms, and certainly some of the more emotional and lyrical composers of the Romantic period. So there's a little bit about Mozart, an absolutely incredible, prolific composer for only 35 years of life. It just goes to show what can happen when you give your brain and creativity juices the chance to shine and the chance to actually come to light. There was nothing more prolific than Mozart. There was nothing more amazing about his compositions. He was an absolute musical freak of nature. Freak in the nicest possible way. Now, Mozart was a master in the classical period of music. Now, I talked a little while back about the Romantic period with Richard Wagner. That came after the classical period. The classical period was all more about form and more about and structure, but within that structure, which became the bedrock and the solid base from which compositions could be written, there was certainly the ability to be able to write some incredible compositions. And I suppose it was this structure that in essence gave Mozart the ability to be able to imagine and also to be able to compose over 600 pieces of music, which he did. The great thing about Mozart, he just wasn't a symphonic composer. He ranged from symphonies to concertos to sonatas to operas. This is the breadth of the talent and genius of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And I think the challenge for all of us today, Mozart knew who he was. Mozart knew what he was capable of, and he went with it. I think the challenge for us today is to look at our abilities and sort of think, oh, maybe I can't do that. To think, well, maybe I can. This is the challenge that Mozart puts before us. Well, and I suppose I talked about Salieri a little while before. He was an arch rival of Mozart. I mean, Salieri would compose something and Mozart would come along and make it better. It was just something about him. Mozart was also almost a little bit playful with the way that he was. And there was a movie that came out in 1984 called Amadeus. And this movie very much captured Mozart in all of his compositional glory, as well as talking a little bit about his life behind the scenes. So I thought to, really capture who Mozart was a little bit, I thought I'd just play a little bit of a clip from the movie where you see him, in a sense, upstaging one of Salieri's compositions in front of some really prominent guys indeed. So enjoy that one. And by the way, the clips are in the description below, so you'll see them there, so click on them to play them. And I thought we actually needed to have one of Mozart's works played by, in this case, the Norwegian Chamber Orchestra. And this is the overture to one of his operas, The Marriage of Figaro. And you'll see what I mean by here. You'll see that this is an absolute force of nature, this song. There are some stunning little motifs and themes going throughout all of this. And as you listen to it, you can't help but getting excited and swept away by what is the power and the fun of the Marriage of Figaro. Of course, the Marriage of Figaro story is sort of fun in itself, so it kind of captures that theme quite well. Very, very fun indeed. When I listen to the Marriage of Figaro, I get quite excited when I listen to it. I think, well, this is just something really, really cool about this. The way that the strings do what they do, the way that everyone's just getting so busy and chaotic with their playing, is something quite compelling to watch. Now, you might be thinking, oh, come on, Trevor, it's just classical music. Guys, just put that aside. We are watching a guy that wrote over 600 pieces of music in just over 35 years of life. And it didn't start when he was 0. It started a little bit later. So, 600 pieces in 35 years of life is quite an incredible feat indeed. So please put that on out of respect for Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and what he brought to this world, and the fact that he will always be remembered for the incredible change he brought into music. So I encourage you to look at both of those clips, which are in the description below. Well, as you can tell, if you've come back for another video, we cover all sorts of genres on this channel. So we've gone classical today, and I encourage you to look at both of those. And if this is your first time to Life Reflections Through Music, welcome to the channel. It's really, really great that you've joined. And if all of us have hung around to the end when we've heard about the inspiration of Mozart, thank you for doing that indeed. And by the way, I've also included below my video to the last guy, Bob Sinclair. So if you want to check out that one, feel free. Well, that's it for today. Next time, we're going to go on to a couple that were pretty big in the 1970s, and that is Captain and Tennille. So until then, I'll catch you around.